right, Randy, Fretful Dreams, episode 4.
4? Yeah. Sweet. How's everybody doing?
Yeah.
I'm Randy King of King Electric Guitars, and with me I have my good friend
Jimmy Ether,
of
a.k.a. Randy will
call
probably
him
call me
Ryan.
Ryan
Yeah,
half the
sorry.
time. Everybody calls me Ryan.
I seem to slip up from time to time and forget your...
Get my nom de clear.
I try not to call you by your government name, as we like to say.
Don't call me my government name.
Actually, I just was getting coffee, and the lady inside got called, and she screamed out, "Don't you dare call me by my government name." I was just like, I want to hang out with her.
Yeah.
That's who I want to hang out with.
That's someone who's on the run.
Mm-hmm.
So what are we talking about today?
I figured today let's talk about something that, just a few years ago I was struggling with, which was kind of, how do I get into this? I think I can build a guitar. I think I can do this. I think I could do that. I would like to just kind of give some hints, some tricks, some don't do's, because, you're talking to a guy who bought a bandsaw and let it sit in his garage for 3.5 years.
Right.
I didn't even have a garage. There's better ways of doing things. I probably would have a little bit of money in the bank right now had I not made some of these mistakes.
Right.
And then, should you try to find an apprenticeship? Let's just, kind of get into that.
Okay.
And,
Well, cool. Well, so at what point did you think you wanted to start building guitars? Like, how old were you?
Well, I know at like 16, Steve Vai's Guitar Player magazine, or Guitar World magazine, I found out it since was, he had, him and Billy Sheehan were on the cover.
I think I remember that issue.
And he was holding a guitar that was just flames. All the bodies were,
Yeah.
the body was flames.
Yep.
And I was like, dude, I got to have that. Like, I'm playing my whatever Strat copy I had at the time. And I'm like,
Right.
but I got to have that. And like, look, so I'm looking at the Strat copy going, so this neck bolts onto this body, and my dad makes furniture, and why the hell can't we do this? Right. So I went to my dad. I'm like, hey, let's do this. He's like, I'm not building that ugly damn thing. I thought it would be cool as hell because, we were both into hot rods and stuff. And I thought, it's flames. He'll think it's cool. Oh, he wasn't having that. But at that point, I was like, okay, well, let's build something. And we talked about it. And of course, unfortunately, it never happened. But at 16, when I was really starting to play guitar, I thought, well, this can't be that hard,
See, I did not think that way at all. I thought this it never occurred to me to build a guitar or anything like that at that age. I was like, this must be like,
some kind of
mystical voodoo.
Right,
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And then later in life, my dad had these 2 guitars that I was learning to play on, and they were these little beater acoustics and stuff. And the bridge of one cracked, and my brother, who is a woodworker, but he knows nothing about guitars, built a bridge for it and put a bridge on it. And I was like, oh, well, so, okay.
I've seen that bridge.
Yes, you've seen that bridge. That thing is horrible. Right. So, but those are kind of things where I was like, this is doable.
Yeah,
and
it's possible. Right.
And then as I started like, hey, I'm in this punk rock band, and why does my strap lock button keep snatching out? And, I'm a poor kid who can't afford to,
Toothpicks.
Toothpicks. Exactly. I was the dude who walked around with my gig bag or box or whatever, and it always had toothpicks. It always had some super glue.
Yep.
It always had, I was that guy. I was the dude who I saved plenty of shows just because I happened to have a couple slow blow fuses, that kind of crap.
I remember going to some wedding or something, and they had those cocktail skewers,
And you're like, ooh.
And I was like,
don't mind if I do.
Grabbed like a bunch of them. They were
Right.
just sitting out unused and like ready to be skewered or whatever. And I was like, oh, I know what those are for. And I grabbed them. So they had the little like cellophane things on the tips of them, and they're long.
Yep. Yeah.
And so I still find them in guitar cases now and then. I'll find one.
Yeah. And then I worked at a pawn shop, so there was always like, "Hey, there's this guitar. How do we make this thing play?" Like,
I don't think you told me that part. You worked at a pawn shop?
I worked at a pawn shop for years in Griffin. There used to be this pawn shop where, when I moved to Griffin, like all the cool guys worked at this pawn shop, and I suckered my way in there and became part of the Griffin music scene.
That's Griffin for you.
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah,
all the cool guys worked at
a pawn shop. Yeah. That's Grip Town. Yeah, so I was playing in a hip hop band at the time. I was playing in a punk rock band at the time. I was playing in a metal band at the time, and it was all the same dudes from the pawn shop. Like
Right.
we joked around about going on tour with like 4 bands, but it'd be 5 guys. Like we just keep all the money and we go. But yeah, so there was the pawn shop trick of like, hey, the pawn shop trick is when you have a volume knob, it's all scratchy. You just take it and you wrap your hand around it and you just shake the shit out of it.
Yeah.
You know, that trick. Like, or hey, why does this amp not work? And you just take all the knobs and back and forth and then
Just
plug it in.
Busting the carbon
loose. You're just busting the carbon loose. That's all you're doing. So, and then I learned that kind of stuff. And then just always tweaking on my own junk,
Well, yeah, for me, it was like, I guess what took the fear out. I mean, number one, I never had expensive guitars anyway. Mm-hmm. So like at a point I would be like, I'm not going to, like I spent $300 on this guitar and I'm going to take it to somebody and spend $100 getting it set up. I don't think so. So I'm just going to figure it out myself. And that's kind of how I got started with doing my own setups and things like that. And then of course, 30 years later, I learned I'm doing it wrong from you, but it's still, whatever, it worked for 30 years.
Well, then I guess I kind of forget there's a young part of my life that I forgot about. I was in the Air Force from 92 to 96, and I was down in Valdosta, and I was a dude hanging around the music store going, this place is cool. And I was taking guitar lessons from this guy named Ben Owens, and Ben still builds guitars he's got Ben Owens Music in Valdosta, Georgia. Awesome place. He's a guitar builder himself.
Yeah.
But he was kind of like I was at the time. He didn't build anything. He was just kind of tweaking and changing pickups. And so my first real guitar actually came from Ben because he suckered me into painting like half of his house. And then I got a Gibson Nighthawk, which a Gibson Nighthawk on me looks like I'm playing a banjo, but It was a Gibson. And at the time, my ex-wife's maiden name was Gibson. So, only a Gibson's good enough and all that. So she made the little truss rod cover have her name on it and all this junk. It was really, really cheesy. But anyway, so I learned a ton from Ben and just hanging around guys,
Right.
And at that point I was like, well, what am I doing?
So what are some of the, like when you finally decided to start building something, what are the bigger mistakes that you made, you think?
Well, first thing is I started off with a kit. And that's fine. Don't let anybody tell you that, you just built a kit. Like you're learning. Like if you can't afford a kit, then buy a crappy guitar and figure out what's wrong with it. Do whatever you can do to just get into it. Whether that means buying a guitar and it has a couple issues and you fix it and flip it, or if you can't fix it, you save it for parts, whatever. That's fine. But don't be afraid to buy a kit. But when you do, buy a good kit. Don't buy a $19 kit. Don't buy I bought a nice kit from a company that it was a good kit. I put it together, but of course the first thing I did was hacked all this. I spent $300 on a Les Paul Jr. kit and it turned out great, beautiful. However, I took it and hacked into it immediately because I just can't leave things alone. And that's me. And that's why I knew, you don't have to buy all the tools at one time. That was my biggest thing. My very first thing, if I'm going to do this, I got to have all this stuff.
Right.
So I bought, hundreds and hundreds of dollars on tools. Yeah. Some of which, because I was watching videos and stuff, and there'd be some dude with a little hand drill drilling holes for the tuners and stuff. Right.
Right.
So when I show up for my apprenticeship that I worked at, I had this drill and the guy's like, what in the fuck is that? What are you supposed to do with that? I'm like, oh, it's for the tuners. He goes, you ain't ever heard of a damn stop? Like you put a stop on the drill bit. No, you don't have time for this. Like quit this crap. So I spent all this money on, I think I spent $20 on that little hand drill, that's money that I wasted. It's just buy what you need to accomplish the job you have in front of you. And then go from there. I think that's a big one. They
didn't have
waster.
fancy guitar, based tools in the 50s.
No, they didn't.
They used what they had.
And, I was buying radius gauges and stuff. And that's cool. You're going to use all that stuff eventually. Right. But I was buying all this stuff. But I was buying it because I was learning how to do some of the stuff myself. But again, there was things that I was like, ooh, that looks cool. And it's made just for that. And it's $60 and that's no big deal.
Yeah.
But if I go back through and I count the amount of $60, $70, $80, $150 tools that I bought,
several $1,000s
that
worth
I've
of-
never even touched,
Right.
because somebody else showed me another way. And I think that's what'll get me into my next point is there's like 10,000 ways of doing something.
Yeah.
You know, hey, if you can't afford a bandsaw and you got nobody that can help you out with a bandsaw, but you have a drill press, draw your line around where you're going to cut the body and drill 10,000 holes and then take it.
Sure.
I mean, hey man, there's nothing that says you can't. And that was my thing is I kept saying, well, I can't do it until I have this, or I can't and I can't. So I waited years and years and years. And then finally, I mean, ultimately the thing with me was when my dad passed away, I was like, what the hell am I doing? I keep saying I'm going to do this and I keep making excuses. And that's when I bought my kit the next day. So as soon as you have that inkling that you think you want to try it, just do it.
Right.
Who knows? You know, I would have been 10 years younger, and you know, I'm an old ass man now. So now I'm like, oh God, I got a lot of catching up to do. But those are the
You're
biggest
so much
things.
older than me too, man. That's the great thing about it.
Yeah, right.
Actually, I think you're younger than me.
Yeah, I think so. But anyway, but you know, that's the biggest thing for me was like just going off the deep end. Just find a project, one little thing, focus on doing that.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
I think that's a pitfall that a lot of people do. Like I said, I bought more stuff.
Yeah.
I knew once I said, hey, I'm going to do this, like I was going to do it. Like I'd been wanting to do it for years. At one point when I was talking about being in Valdosta, I was building cabinets. Like I was building amp cabinets, and I had King amplification, like a little thing made up. Like I was doing that kind of stuff. So I've always kind of figured I was going to do this somehow. I just didn't know what it was going to be. But you know, I was buying tools and storing them for like I have a bandsaw that I still use to this day that was in a open carport for 3 years. It was $100. If you got money to spend, cool, do it. But you know, you don't have to do that.
Yeah,
So-
yeah. I mean, like the cabinet, the two cabinets behind you and the cabinet behind me, I built those because I was like, I can get the Baltic birch, and do it myself and learn how to do my own dovetails and all that kind of stuff rather than spend. I think they were going for like there was this place in Chicago that was building these really nice heavy duty Baltic birch.
Was it
cabinets.
Emperor by any chance?
Emperor, yes.
Yeah, I remember those. Yeah.
I think they were like you know, $1,500 a cab or something like that.
Are they still around? I haven't seen them much anymore.
I think so. I don't know. But you know, there are a lot of companies like that though. And I was just like, well, screw this. My buddy can show me how to do dovetail joints. So I built these cabinets, but of course they're too heavy to haul anywhere. So now they still are the best sounding cabinets I have, but they stay in here. But that's the other thing with like, it's funny, like the guitar building from scratch, the woodworking craftsman side of it always seemed way too complicated and almost like it had to be a company doing it to me.
Right.
But you and I both were Eddie Van Halen fans, and I knew he modded his guitars and hacked them up. I mean, that was the lore from the very beginning.
Right.
You know, what the hell is he playing? What is that monstrosity that he's got going on? Why are the pickups barely hanging into the, one of the things? So I knew I could dig in. So like, that's how I learned how to do electronics. I think that was my first probably I did get that electronics book for musicians. Did you ever see that?
No.
There's an electronics book for musicians where you could build your own fuzz pedals and stuff like that. That was out in like the 80s, It was like a common thing. So I got that, played around a little bit with that, and then started wiring up these Strats and stuff like that. But, once you get into it, it's like a guitar is pretty simple. Like,
in a lot of ways, yes, it is. And
the electronics part of it, especially.
Yeah. I mean, you start getting into like, oh, I really got to pay attention when you start talking about your scale lengths and all that. And of course,
that's the part that seemed mysterious.
There's a billion of things that I'm not trying to make light of it. Look, if it was that simple, everybody would be doing it. However, I mean, let's be honest. If you're talking about a bolt-on style body, all right. Let's say a Telecaster style body. Its genius is that it's ultimately, and I'm stealing this from another guitar maker guy, Texas Toast Guitars, that said this. It's literally middle school shop project to
Right.
make a guitar body.
Right.
Not that difficult. The hard part is making sure it, all the other stuff. But as far as just cutting out the body and making it look like a guitar body, that's a middle school shop project.
Right.
Finishing it is a whole nother story.
Yeah.
But, there you go. So it's really not that bad. You were talking about, make your own fuzz and all that kind of stuff. So one of the things that got me realize that, hey, I've got a little bit of skill in this was when I was in the Air Force to make extra bucks, you always had dudes that would go TDY to wherever, overseas somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, hey, I was bored, so I bought this electric guitar and this amp. And it'd be like a Charvel or, something fairly cool. And I could pick it up for 100 bones.
Yeah.
But it's got, the screws are rusty now. And well, okay. So how can I would take these guitars, rip them apart, clean them all up, make them look like brand new and flip it for $300. And now I just made $200 and spent no money at all. Like that was another thing that I did quite a bit of.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because they were always around, they're always abundant. So I would do that kind of stuff. And that's what got me working at that music store that I worked at and meeting Ben. And then Ben showed me how to do stuff. I mean, the very first Les Paul I ever strung up, because I didn't know any better, I strung up backwards. And Ben's like, dude, what are you doing? Like not that the strings were backwards, but it went around the post wrong. I took it around the outsides of the post on the treble side. And he's like, what are you, like, it makes more sense. He's like, sure it does, whatever. So, like I knew very little at that point.
Yeah.
So I used to change like one string at a time on my dad's acoustic guitars because I thought he told me that to do that because he didn't know any better and thought, yeah, you still do it, don't you?
Yeah. I do that on all my guitars just out of habit. Some of it, so like for instance, that ES 125 that you've got of mine, you take all the strings off and you've lost all the settings on your bridge. It just floats. It's a piece of wood.
Right. Sure.
It's not glued down or anything. So, I mean, yeah. So I do it out of habit, but yeah, I think I was told at some point that you're supposed to.
Right.
Probably by my dad.
Right. Because all the neck will warp and this and that. But I mean.
Yeah. And I would do this like back and forth thing, like put the low E, the high E.
Right. Yeah. You go back. Right.
I don't do that anymore.
So, I think that's the other thing is like, if you want to learn, and this was the biggest thing, we're going to get into like an apprenticeship. Like how would you get an apprenticeship? But one of the biggest things I learned in my apprenticeship was if you want to build guitars, you need to learn to fix them first.
Okay. I was going to ask you, do you feel like that's necessary?
Is it necessary? No, it's really not.
Mm-hmm.
But is it necessary to be a guitar player to build a guitar? Well, most people say, well, yeah, but Leo Fender wasn't.
Yeah, I see a lot of people on TikTok and Instagram who will say that they're not guitar players at all, but they build guitars. I've always felt that a little weird. Like, how do you even know what you're building is good if you can't play?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I mean,
if you can't set up a guitar, how do you if you've never had any training in guitar setup and stuff like that? How do you know what you're building is good?
I guess it's kind of a different road for everybody. But for me, like I said, first thing is learn how to repair because it's much cheaper. All right. So you want to get into the game of guitar and you think you want to build guitars possibly one day. Cool.
Yeah.
You got time. You can do it. And you really can. Start small. Do some repairs. Buy some junk guitars. Fix them. Go from there. Learn how to refinish a guitar. Learn how to do fret work. You can go online right now and buy a neck for $29.
Yeah.
And it's a piece of wood. I'm not going to say it's a great piece of wood, but it's a piece of wood.
It's already fretted and
stuff?
Yeah,
sure. So now take that and figure out how do I make these frets level? How do I crown? How do I do this? If you can't afford to buy the tools, well, how would I make a tool to do this?
Right.
Figure that out. Then rip all those frets off and figure out how do I refret this neck now? All those kind of things you can do with a little bit of money. A couple $100, you could really learn some good skill. But the thing for me is learning how to repair has saved me in builds so many times.
Right.
Where I go, oh my God, this thing just happened. I'm like, oh, well, that's a simple, bam, that's
Right.
this.
You might have junked the body, but now you know you can patch it.
Yeah, sure, whatever. Or, finish repair, whatever. It just makes it so much easier. But the other thing is, how do you know what's wrong with a guitar until you fix it?
Right.
How do you know what the inherent issues are with this style, with this bridge style, with this body style, with this? How do you know unless you've fixed those issues?
Right.
And that was what I really kind of was. I thought I was going to get this apprenticeship with this guy because he was building guitars and I was just going to be building guitars. And luckily he was like, no, you got to learn how to repair them first.
Right.
And I was like, man, he goes, okay, cool. Then just here, have at it. And I put together this body that I ended up recently just cutting all apart because it was horrible work. And it was just because I was forcing myself to do something.
Mm-hmm.
So apprenticeships are they're great. There are schools that you can go to.
Yeah.
If you can afford to, you can go to a 4, 5, 6 day school and build a guitar to where the next time around you could probably get close to doing it yourself and you'd have enough knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
But you're looking at, a couple grand probably
those
or
Texas
more.
Toast folks.
Texas Toast does one. Sully Guitars is doing one again. Coloma Guitars is doing one.
Oh, Coloma does one. That's nice.
Yeah. There's several.
Huh.
And they're, you're going to pay probably $2,000 or more for the class, for all your parts, then you got to talk about flying out and all that kind of stuff. So it's not
a cheap thing, but
it's not a cheap thing.
But is it better than buying all the gear that you bought ahead of time?
Possibly. Yeah.
Maybe.
That might be a better, there's so many options. So yeah, that might be a better thing.
Yeah.
It might be, hey, I'm spending this money. I know I can do this.
Right.
Okay. For me, it was like, I know I can do this and I have some background, but I know I can do this and I don't have any background and I'm looking at spending all this money, but how do I know I really, really want to do this? Yeah. Maybe that's your deal. Maybe you need to spend the money that you think, because my thing on that was I can't spend that kind of money when I can buy all these tools that I need to. But maybe it's worth taking the gamble and spending the $2,000 or the $3,000 by the time you get a hotel and all that. And you get some experience and you decide, oh, this is not as glamorous as I thought it was, or this is not.
Don't waste the next 3 years of your life trying to screw around with this.
Right. So, but all right. So, an apprenticeship is one of those things where that is an option. That is a road you can go down if you can find one.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting harder and harder to find apprenticeships. And the reason why, I think, is that I think in the guitar game, I think, oh man, this guy's really cool, and he'll let me hang out at his shop. But what are you bringing to them?
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
So for coding and other stuff, audio production, I've had apprentices several times. It's a huge drain. As the person who's the mentor or whatever,
right?
Like, it's something I always love doing, but like taking the idea of taking somebody on and doing that, I'm just like, that's going to take 4 hours out of my day just to, you're not going to bring anything to the table for me.
Yeah.
And so I can understand why that
was kind of where I was going to hit on. Like, if you can find an apprenticeship, you got to bring something to the table. Like, for me, what was good was I knew enough to say, hey man, look, I noticed that you got 30 setups. If you'll show me exactly how you want to do these setups, if you'll let me watch you on the next 2 or 3, I'll do a couple. And then I got where I was doing setups for them. Yeah. But even if you can't do setups, even go, hey, show me how you change these strings, or show me how you want me to pull the strings apart, clean the guitar up, and have it ready for you to do the actual work. Whatever, but
ways I can save you time. Yeah.
Because you are teaching me something that I would have to spend. The way I looked at it is, I would have had to spend 30 grand to go to school to learn what I learned working at that shop.
Sure.
You know, now did I help him make money? Of course, but that's okay. You know, that's part of the game.
That's your pay.
So, but you know, my thing was when I walked in there and I asked him for a job, I'll clean your toilets, I'll scrub your floors, I'll do whatever I got to do. And every day I walked in, I knew like, I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to do this, even as much as like helping sell on the floor, whatever I could do to get that. So I think that's another thing. Like if you're going to look for an apprenticeship, you have to understand that there's been people. When I worked at that shop, I had 2 guys that worked under me because they were in there begging for an apprenticeship. And I was like, well, you can't have one, but you can come work with me. There was at least 10 people a week that would come in and be like, hey man, I think this is cool. I really want to do this.
Yeah.
Really? All right, let's try. Come on, let's do this and let's see. And if you're not going to bring anything to the table, you're wasting your time and don't even try. So, you know, the good thing is with nowadays, before you even think about going and asking for an apprenticeship, you need to buy a book. I would suggest Dan Earlywine's Guitar Repair Guide. Dan Earlywine is the god. He is STUMAC. He's one of the guys that came up with all those tools that STUMAC does and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But when it comes to repairs and it comes to guitar stuff, he's the god. Like he's the dude. Buy his book and watch every single video you can watch on repairs, on all that kind of stuff. Practice it on your own stuff and then go in and ask for an apprenticeship.
Are there any good YouTube channels that you've come across with people that are doing builds other than just repair? I see a lot of repair stuff like on YouTube and TikTok.
Man, there's tons. There's Texas Toast is good because to me they have some personality. I don't like just watching boring stuff.
Right.
Sully Guitars, he doesn't do much YouTube stuff anymore, but his stuff back in the day was great because again, he has a lot of personality. But there's so many different things. I have some stuff on my YouTube channel, King Electric Guitars. You can look at some of that. Crimson Guitars is pretty cool. I used to send questions in and ask like, hey, what tools do I have to have? What are this? And you know, and that's the person that said, you need a bandsaw, you need this. And I immediately went out and bought it. Right. I wasn't even at that place yet, but I went out and bought it. So yeah, do all your homework and then go try to get on somewhere. And again, don't get on somewhere and be a drain. Like you got to bring something to the table.
Right.
And I really think that the apprenticeship thing is great for people, but like you said, it ends up being more difficult. I have a kid that comes and hangs out with me, and he's a great kid. Lucian, if you're listening, clean my damn shop. But like he's a good kid. He's 15 years old. Like he comes to the house and he does a lot of good stuff. But it is, you know, I'll have like, I can get all this done today. And then when he shows up like, oh yeah, I got a third of it. Yeah, right. So
exactly.
You're going to learn if you're trying to get into this gig, if you're trying to get into doing repairs, builds, whatever, there's 2 types of people. They're either extremely nice and extremely helpful or just dicks.
Right.
There is no in between. Don't waste your time with the dicks. If you hear no, because I was told no by several people, and this guy, unfortunately, is not even a dick. He just had way too much stuff going on in his life at the time. But if you hear no, don't let it kill your dream. If this is your dream, don't let it kill your dream. Move on. Figure out another way.
Yeah.
Keep doing YouTube. Keep buying books. Keep watching videos, all that kind of stuff. Maybe you'll never will find an apprenticeship. Maybe you'll just have to figure it out on your own. Maybe you'll have to pay and go to one of these classes. If you're a young kid and you think you want to do this kind of thing and you really, really want to get into it, then there's Luthier Schools.
Yeah.
But that's one of those things like, what is a luthier exactly? I still don't call myself a luthier and probably won't for 20 years or more.
Yeah.
Because I think a luthier can build anything. And if you told me I want an acoustic guitar right now, I'd be like, oh my God. Yeah. Like I'm sure I could do it, but that's a whole nother skill set.
Let's do it, Randy.
Right. So, you know, but they're schools, and you're going to spend a lot of time doing that. So there's a million different avenues to do this and figure it out. You know,
Cool.
maybe that's not great advice, but there's a way to do it if you put your mind to it. Yeah. Yeah. Figure it out, kid.
All right, well, cool. Well, you can find us on social media. I'm at jimmyether.com and on Jimmy Ether on pretty much every social media app. What about you, Randy?
Yeah, I'm at kingelectricguitars.com, and I have a YouTube, King Electric Guitars channel, and most social media except for X, because that dude's an a-hole.
Yeah, and leave us a comment on YouTube, and we also have an email address, fretfulDreams@headphonetreats.com. This is part of the Headphone Treats podcast network, so you can drop us a line at either of those if you want to be, a guest, or you got an idea for a segment or anything like that. We're open to that.
Give us some show suggestions. Give us some questions. Give us, give us some things to talk about.
Yeah. We're scrounging right now.
Yeah. What was that song? Let's scare of something. You know what I'm talking about?
You're gonna get that damn thing stuck in my head.
How about love? Well, what was it when he's like,
That's how you sound like the guy from Family Guy when you do it. Though.
You're like popsicles.
Something to talk about.
And this is why we talk on microphones, right?
Yeah.
Because
we're on camera too.
Yeah, that's true.
Unfortunately for everyone.
Uh-huh.
See ya.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Fretful Dreams is part of the Headphone Treats podcasting network.